the DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now.
No, it wasn't. That is one of those moments that lives on in this Epstein saga. Pam Bondi making claims she could not support, later ousted as Attorney General. She was back in Washington, though, and this is a big deal today, going under oath, facing lawmakers' questions under the force of law about Epstein and specifically the Trump DOJ's handling. Now, there was the effort to have this as a more public on-camera hearing, but then she was fired. House Republicans changed the terms. Still, though, useful to get her talking to Congress at all. Here, though, Bondi wouldn't have to answer the questions technically under oath, and the proceedings would not be videotaped, although it's similar to under oath when you speak to Congress because there are consequences if you lie and the DOJ wants to do anything about it. They released her opening statement where she said the DOJ did blunder on redactions, that there were errors. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute. Is she outing herself? Is Pam Bondi saying she made the errors? No. This is Washington. This predates the Trump era where officials, if they're ever saying something bad happened, they're probably following it up with who's to blame. In her case, she blames her replacement, Acting AG Todd Blanche. I delegated oversight over the process to him, she says. And so today was useful in some ways, although House Democrats said that had there been true cooperation and transparency, it could have been far more useful.
A disservice to the American people that this interview is not being recorded, videotaped, and then released to the American public. She said, and I quote, Acting AG Blanche was managing the entire investigation.
Pam Bondi confirmed that they had 6 million files in their possession and have only released 3 million.
It's disgusting. It's a cover-up in broad daylight.
This interview is a smokescreen to try to show the American people that they are complying while they are not.
A lot happened today, and we have more details I'm gonna basically report on over time because we have different chunks that we learn. But I want to bring in our guest first, Gretchen Carlson, journalist, co-founder of Lift Our Voices, a former Fox News anchor who has reported on this story with us before, and Josh Marshall, founder and editor of Talking Points Memo. Josh, what do you see as sort of the big picture here as Bondi, in the service of maybe blaming her replacement who she's mad at, which is a thing anyone could relate to if you thought someone took your job, she makes assertions here to Congress about errors by this DOJ.
Yeah, look, I see this as it's part of the same story, which is, they came in with an unpopular agenda, a lot of things they were lying about, and the last 6 months has basically been trying to keep all of that from blowing everything apart and breaking as many laws as they can, switching the subject. I still think that, the reason that Donald Trump launched a war in Venezuela and then Iran at the beginning of this year was that he was getting more unpopular at home because of things like the Jeff Epstein files and all these things. And this was a way for him to show that he was still in charge, still has power. So all of this is part of, it's all part of the same canvas, trying to keep the consequences of their unpopular policies, his lies, the president's lies, from catching up with them.
And Gretchen, there are times where officials blame each other and it's just a big debate. Here, we can report that before Bondi was out, Blanche was running point on this. He was signing the documents about the releases. He was overseeing that. He was making what were initially questionable claims about the volume of files. What do you see in this back and forth today that's spilled into public view?
Well, I think, first of all, Blanche took over this whole investigation because Bondi bungled it so much in that clip that you showed earlier on. Did she know that she was going to eventually be fired and she'd put the blame on him? No. But I think one of the biggest headlines coming out of today was also the fact that it was obviously a predetermined thing between Comer and Bondi that she would not discuss anything with regard to Donald Trump. Because every time that came up today by the Democratic members of Congress, the Department of Justice lawyers who were in the room stood up and said, no, she's not going to be answering those questions. So I think that was an agreed upon term. Also, there were no other Republicans that came to this hearing today. That's also very telling. I'm sure their constituents would like to know that they don't care enough about the Epstein files to be there in person. And I also find it offensive that there are all these leads in the 3 million documents that have been released. And yet nobody's looking into those at the same time that Trump continues to launch DOJ investigations into his enemies. I think we should be paying attention to that part of the story tonight as well.
Yeah, important points. And Gretchen, relatedly, we know that before the Epstein files were released, the DOJ was giving Trump notice about his name in them. We have sources that Bondi was bristling at questions about what she and Trump talked about, as you alluded to, had a plan to basically rule that out, and allegedly lost, or I should say reportedly, according to a lawmaker in the room, lost her temper.
I also personally asked the former AG 5 times and 5 different questions about her conversations with President Trump, whether he directed her at any given time on the Epstein files, what he knew, what he asked her to redact or not, and she refused to answer any questions about President Trump.
Gretchen?
Yeah, I mean, to what I said, I think that was part of the deal. Another big bombshell that came out today, though, was that apparently the FBI scrubbed files before they even reached the DOJ. So now this panel, mainly the Democrats, are saying, we got to get Kash Patel in here. I mean, we got to get him under oath to answer questions about why did the FBI scrub all these files? And is that actually true? And if so, why did they do it before it got to the DOJ? You know, Bondi said today, yeah, we made mistakes, but that still is not giving us the answers that we need to really find out what's going on in these Epstein files.
Understood. Josh, I want to also point out the sort of the tentacles of this, because there were 2 DOJ officials at today's interview. She's, of course, the recent but former attorney general. Democrats were critical of that. They said that they repeatedly stepped in to stop Bondi from answering questions about those Trump conversations, which we discussed. They're pretty high-ranking, and reporters pressed one of them.
What's your response to criticism that the presence of the department is a potential conflict for Ms. Bondi, given that her interests might diverge from the department?
That is silly and not something that is for her to consider, and she apparently didn't see it as such.
But why did you tell her not to answer specific questions?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into my reasoning.
You know, the Orwellian onion there is they go into the secret meeting to help someone avoid questions, and they come out to dodge questions about the questions they helped someone dodge. Washington.
And to say, well, she didn't have to dodge. I guess she decided to dodge on her own. You know, Donald Trump, his whole life, his whole career, his business career, his career in politics is always about playing for time, right? Change the subject, kind of kick the can down the road, obfuscate. And this is, again, it's another example of that. And it all stems from the fact that he had the audacity to run on this as one of his central proof points of his campaign. He's running against the corruption and the pedophiles and the bad people with Jeff Epstein, and he's a central player. You almost have to kind of, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I got to take my hat off to you. That's bold, right? And so we're, you know, still in this same playing for time. I think what we also see, though, is power is unitary, right? He is becoming less powerful. It is harder and harder to pull these things off. We'd like to think that judges are totally indifferent to the political process. They're not. They have a sense of what's going on in the larger society. So, you know, kicking the can down the road.
Well, yeah, judges are part of the long-term class in our federal government, and there are pros and cons to that. But one of the pros is that some of these judges understand that picking the wrong fight early and then being demagogued is going to actually help the government defendant that they're trying to rein in. And so even with Doge, people said that some of this seems pretty obvious. Why is it taking so long? And there were reasons, I think, that you alluded to. And now, tonight, we've got these rulings. We've got the one I mentioned just in the prior block that is really hammering whether there was collusion and deceit.